Good day, grade 12 learners. Welcome to today's Life Sciences lesson. My name is Sina Sekheche, and this lesson is brought to you by the Free State Department of Education in collaboration with Pagama Research and Development. Right, so as you remember that we are still busy with our big topic for paper 2, which is evolution, which amounts to 54 marks of your paper 2. That is 1/3 or a third of the paper. So it contains quite a lot of marks. So today we are proceeding with our topic. So let us check what the subtopics will be for today. So like we always start our lesson with our objectives. So we're going to look at the objectives that we need to obtain or to achieve at the end of this lesson. So for today, remember last week we could not finish speciation and extinction and the effects of each on biodiversity. So this is where we're going to start with speciation, and we're going to explain how the process occurs. Then you must be able to describe speciation using examples. And then you must also know how to describe speciation through geographic isolation, and also be able to give a brief outline of the reproductive isolation mechanisms that help to keep species separate. So this will happen after speciation. Then you see why the species can no longer interbreed. So these are the reproductive mechanisms that are going to prevent these species from being able to interbreed. Then you must also know any one example of natural selection and evolution in present times. So we'll talk there about the bacteria and the viruses. And then you must be able to know the interpretation or describe the interpretation of a phylogenetic tree. Very important. Once we start now with human evolution, we're going to be talking more about phylogenetic trees. Then you must be able to show the place of the family Hominidae in the animal kingdom. Then you must also know the characteristics that humans share with African apes. Now, this is an exam question. You cannot enter the exam not knowing those characteristics. And then also the anatomical differences between the African apes and the humans. So you must know the similarities, what they share. Those are similarities, and also the differences. So when you are given the structures to compare, you must be able to tell us what are the differences between the African apes and the humans, and also what are the similarities between the humans and the African apes. Then lines of evidence that support the idea of common ancestor for living hominids, including humans. So you must tell us the lines of evidence. Remember when we started this topic, we started with the lines of evidence or the evidence that were used to support the theory of evolution. Now, fossils, genetic evidence, and cultural evidence, you must also know what evidence was used for the hominids. Now we are being more specific. And then you must also be able to discuss the out of Africa hypothesis. What do we mean by out of Africa hypothesis? It means that modern humans or the Homo sapiens that you see today originated in Africa and then migrated to other continents. So this is what out of Africa means. It means they originated here. Then you must also give the evidence for this out of Africa hypothesis. And seeing that we've done a hypothesis and a theory and a law, then you know why is this a hypothesis and not a law or not a theory. So you will also give the evidence to prove this hypothesis. Right, so these are all the objectives that you need to achieve at the end of this lesson. And when we get to out of Africa hypothesis, we shall have completed the topic of human evolution or of evolution as a whole. Remember, we separated it into 3 parts. Right, so we start with speciation. When you look at this diagram that you see here on the board, you can see that there was an original population, and this population was split by a geographical barrier, and it split into 2. But what happened into this? Let's say this was 1 and this is 2. Or let me write them on the side here so you can see 1 and 2. So where you can see that once we have these populations having split into two populations, there is something that is happening in population 1 and there's also something that is happening in population 2. You have different organisms now. It means these organisms' natural selection happened in each independently, and then all those that had the favorable characteristics for these particular environments survived and then reproduced, and they became new species, as you can see here. New species. And they are new species because if they were to meet again, even if you were to mate them, they will not be able to interbreed. So that is just an overview of what I am seeing here from this diagram. So let us take a look here. Speciation in general overview. You start with a general population or with one population or an ancestor. Sometimes you refer to it as an ancestor population. And then this ancestor population is going to be separated by a geographical barrier. So the separation must be there. So when you talk about speciation, we want to see the separation. Then that is where you're going to explain that this separation was brought by a geographical barrier. Obviously, when you separate something, what do you end up with? It's like you are dividing it into two. So you end up with what? With two population. Remember, you started with one population, and then there was a geographical barrier, and then you end up with two population 1 over here and population 2 over here. But because these organisms in population 1, they were experiencing a different environment than this one in population 2. So they were experiencing different environment. Therefore, natural selection occurred independently. What do we mean by that? It happened here, natural selection. It also happened here, natural selection. And then you end up with what? With organisms that are new, or you have new species, which will be those ones that were selected by the environmental factor here. And it shows in this diagram here, the green beetles are the ones that were favored by the environment, therefore they reproduced and became new species. And also in this population 2, you see that the light brown ones are the ones that were favored and they reproduced, but became new species. Then if you were to mate or to breed the green ones and the brown ones, these ones, they will not be able to interbreed. So when they are not able to interbreed, it means they are now new species. So this is how new species are formed. Right, so they are distinct species because they have undergone natural selection for this particular first environment and for this particular second environment. So I hope you understand. But from the exam guideline, you need to be able to describe the process as it flows. So we need to have that general flow. So you will start with this way. So you go to exam guideline and you write it as it appears on your exam guideline, as it follows the chronological sequence of what is happening. So this is the mechanism of speciation, meaning how does it occur when you have to put it in writing. Firstly, if a population of a single species become separated, I want you to take note of this. Everything starts with a population. Remember, you are explaining speciation. So we don't want you to say the species. You don't start. There is nowhere at the top where you are expected to write species. So please make sure that you write population. So if a population of a single species becomes separated by a geographical barrier, that geographical barrier, it can be a sea, a river, a mountain, or a lake. So you need to check the example that you are given. If you have to apply, you need to specify which geographical barrier can you see there. And mostly, there will be a compulsory mark for this if you are given an example. So please make sure that you note what will be separating the population from the start so that you can mention it as a geographical barrier. So that is the first statement. Then, once there is that separation, you must write the population is going to split into two. Remember, I said once you divide or you separate something, you are going to split into two. You get a mark for just saying that the population is going to split into two. Then, once it has split into two, because there is nothing that is joining this population together, there is no gene flow between the two populations. You get a mark for saying that. Also, you get a mark here. Right. Then, since each population may be exposed to different environmental conditions, you get a mark for writing the different environmental conditions. Or you can say there is competition, depending on an example that you are given. Here you can also write that there is competition. So, because organisms are exposed to different environmental conditions, which is the selection pressure may be different. Natural selection is going to occur how? Independently in the two population. Very important. So you are going to say natural selection. Remember, we've discussed what natural selection is. So there's no need for you here to explain what natural selection is. You just need to tell us that natural selection is going to occur how? Independently, meaning it's going to occur in the first population and also in the second population that have split from the original. And then such that the individuals of the two populations become very different. Just for writing that the organisms or the individuals of each population are going to be different, you get a mark for that. And then once they are different, how are they different? You explain. They are different genotypically and phenotypically. You get another mark also for saying that they are different genotypically and phenotypically. Then, even if the two populations were to mix again, they will not be able to interbreed. You get a mark for saying this? Because they are not the same species. That is why they will not be able to interbreed. It is important for you to mention this because that is what is going to give us, to tell us that now the two populations are now different species. So this is how species are formed, or new species are formed, by a geographical barrier or by a separation of a geographical barrier. So that separation brings all of these happenings, and then you end up with new species. If you can take a look at these diagrams here, you see the finches. These are the cactus finches. You see the warbler finch, and then you see the large ground finch. All of these three birds are the finches, but they are not the same. If you take a look at the beaks of these finches, you can also see that they are not the same. Even the colors of the fur are not the same. But by looking at the similar characteristics, you can conclude that they came from one original ancestor population. Then you can explain to us how did they become to be different. It was because of the separation by a geographical barrier and what happened in each population to make them to become so different. So that is speciation in a nutshell. So for you to be able to apply the recipe, or for you to be able to understand this, you need to apply the recipe. For when you get a question, you must be able to answer. So let us take a look at this question that was taken from the DBE final examination of 2020. It says that potters and lemurs are small mammals. Scientists believe that potters and lemurs share a common ancestor that existed in Africa. Presently, potters only occur in Africa, while lemurs are only found in Madagascar. But they say, scientists think their common ancestor existed in Africa. But today or presently, they are found where? In Africa, where? Only the potos and the lemurs are only found in Madagascar. Now, Madagascar is an island off the east coast of Africa, as shown in the diagram below. So here is the east coast of Africa, and then here is Madagascar. So we learned that Madagascar is where you find now the lemurs, and then the potos, you find them here. But scientists believe that these four potos and lemurs shared a common ancestor that lives somewhere in Africa. So let us check how to apply the recipe now, you say. So these are the diagrams of the potos and the lemurs. So this is a poto, this is a lemur. So you can see they are almost similar. They live on trees, but they are not the same. They are not the same species. So we want to know, how did the potos and the lemurs become different species? So you must be able to apply that recipe that you learned to obtain your 6 marks. There is a lot of marks that you can get from there, more than 6, but you will always be asked for 5 or for 6 marks. So please make sure that you obtain. Then once we've marked, or once the marker has marked all the points that are correct, you will leave just those ones that are extra. But at least you shall have collected what was required, which was 5 or 6, which is 5 or 6. Right, so let us check now. How do you think the potos and the lemurs became different? We need to apply the recipe. What you get from the exam guideline, you must be able to apply it on any question, So the first part is that you must establish that there was a population or an ancestor population that got separated by a geographical barrier. And you must mention that that population, once it is separated, it is going to split into 2, because you're going to get a mark for that, just for saying that. So let us apply that with the potos and the lemurs. We say the common ancestor became separated into 2 groups by the ocean. Why are we saying the ocean? Because we saw that there was a east coast of Africa, and then here there was written Indian Ocean. And then you found an island called Madagascar. So the idea is that Madagascar separated from the east coast of Africa. It is separated by what? By the Indian Ocean. So that is why here you are mentioning an ocean as a geographic barrier. So you can also say here, the common ancestor of the potos and the lemurs, but you're not saying the species of the potos and the lemurs. So you can say the common ancestors of the potos and the lemurs became separated by an ocean, and then it splits into 2 groups. So remember, here we are looking for 2 marks, the splitting and the geographical barrier. And therefore, once the split has happened, you must just remember this. Once something has been separated or the split, there is no gene flow. There is no gene flow between the 2 groups. You get a mark for that. Then each group is going to experience different environmental conditions, or there will be competition. So example of those can be competition also. And that will lead to what? It will lead to our organisms undergoing natural selection independently, because natural selection, the environment is going to be the selective pressure. So in each environment, the organisms are going to undergo natural selection independently. And once that happens, the organisms are going to be how? They are going to be different, or the individuals in each group are going to become now different. And how so? Genotypically and phenotypically. You see, you get a mark for just writing different, and you also get a mark for writing genotypically and phenotypically. And once they are genotypically and phenotypically different, will they be able to interbreed? No. So even if they were to mix again, they cannot produce a fertile offspring, or they cannot interbreed. Why? Because they have become new species of the pothos and the lemurs. Sometimes, because you were asked about the pothos and the lemurs, there will be also a compulsory mark here as indicated by that star or that asterisk, to show that you were actually explaining to us how the pothos and the lemurs were or became different species. So at the end on your answer, we must see the pothos and the lemurs. It must not just be general, it must be what you were asked for. So I hope everyone now knows how to apply the recipe. So this is just another example of speciation. Let us read the question. It says that the present day distribution of 3 closely related species of the dog family, the coyote, jackal, and the dingo, is shown in the world map below. So this map shows us that the dingo or the coyote is found somewhere here. The jackal is found somewhere here around the south of Africa, and then you see here you find the dingo. But all of these are organisms of the species of the dog family. And if you take a look at them, you can already see that they are similar somehow, meaning you must be able to explain to us how did they become different species. Already you can see that the geographical barrier will be what? It will be an ocean because of continental drift. You can say continental drift also, because when you study continental drift, remember when we were doing biogeography, we said all this was one big supercontinent, but then it was separated during continental drift by what? By the ocean or by water. Then you must be able to explain there. Then what type of evidence is shown there? It is biogeography, and then describe how these species could have evolved from a common ancestor. So this is how you are going to explain that. The original population or the common ancestor once lived in one large continent. You see, why are you mentioning continent here? Because you are shown a world map. Then you must talk about the continent. And then it became separated by here, continental drift. Now this shows that you know that one big supercontinent we had was Pangaea, and then it separated into smaller continents, that 5 continents, and then you see that is called continental drift. Or you can say by the oceans. And then after separation, no gene flow amongst the 3 populations. And remember, because we are talking about the 3, you must still apply the example. And then each population experienced different environmental conditions and underwent natural selection independently, and they became different genotypically and phenotypically. Even if the 3 populations were to mix again, you see, just for saying even if they were to mix again, you get a mark. They will not be able to interbreed or produce a fertile offspring, forming the different species of the coyote, the jackal, and the dingo. And here is that compulsory mark. Why are you getting the compulsory mark? Because you were explaining to us how did the coyote, the jackal, and the dingo became different. So we want to see that at the end of your answer. Right, I hope now everyone understands how speciation works. So these are some of the examples that you need to know about speciation. So if you can check here the species of the finches, you see you have finches that are insectivores and finches that are granivores. So these finches feed on grass on the ground, and these ones feed on insects on the tree. You see, these ones are the ground ones, these ones are the tree ones. Then how did they become so different from one another? So it is through speciation. So another example is of the finches. Another example that you can check is one of the Galapagos or the tortoises. So you can see here is a pinta. You see the pinta is that small land, piece of land there. So you see on the pinta island, you find this type of a tortoise. And then here on the hood, you find the hood island tortoise. And look at the saddle-backed shell, intermediate shell. And then here the dome shaped shell. So their shells are different based on where they are found. It means somewhere, somehow, all these three shared a common ancestor. Then you can tell us, how did they become so different? It is through speciation, due to separation of land by water or the ocean or continental drift. These are some other examples that you can look at of speciation. You can take a look at the baobab tree here. You see this is the baobab tree that you find in Australia. So this is an Australian baobab tree. Look at our baobab tree. So this is the baobab tree that you find in South Africa. You can tell that these trees are almost similar. However, they are different. They are not the same species. So somewhere, somehow, they must have shared a common ancestor. Then you can tell us, due to geographical barrier, how did they become different? And look at the ones that you find in Madagascar. They are tall. They go way high up instead of being wide. So it is because of natural selection that occurred there. Then they became so different from the ones that you find in South Africa, and they would look like this. But you cannot argue to say that somewhere, somehow, these may have arose from a common ancestor. Right. Then, once organisms have become different species, what makes them not to be able to interbreed? Remember, we said they will not be able to interbreed or produce a fertile offspring. These are the mechanisms that are going to keep them from being able to interbreed, meaning they keep them isolated from one another, or they stop them from being able to interbreed. So the first one will be breeding at different times of the year. When you look at this diagram here of these butterflies, you see this butterfly here, the first one, it is breeding season, it's January, it's JASO. And then for this second one, so this is the first one. For the second one, when is the breeding time? You see, that will be here, MAMJ. So the times, the months, the May, April, June, they are not the same. So the breeding at different times of the year. So we can say this represents the months. So if the months are not the same, how will this butterfly 1 be able to interbreed with butterfly 2? Because their breeding times are different. So this breeding at different times of the year will isolate these two species. Number 2, species-specific courtship behavior. If you take a look at this diagram of these beds here, you see this one is even looking at this this other bed with a very strange looking red thing underneath there. So it is trying to show its courtship behavior or some intrinsic dances or something to attract the other one. However, the other bed is just astonished. I even like the look on this one because it looks surprised to say, so what are you doing? So the species-specific courtship behavior is no longer the same. Now, this organism here, this bed, has learned to have a different courtship behavior than this one, and they will not be able to communicate now to say, I don't understand what you mean. Then, plant adaptation to different pollinators. Example here, if you see there are plants, these plants here, they have evolved or they formed new species to do what? To be pollinated by bees. And these ones here are pollinated by birds. It means this organism and this organism can no longer be able to interbreed because they have different, or they have adapted to different pollinators. Pollinators will be your bees or your birds. Then infertile offspring, if you take a look here, if you breed a donkey and a horse, they may look similar, but when you interbreed them, they will give you a mule, and a mule is infertile. So once the mule is infertile, it means it cannot produce other mules. So because it cannot produce other meals, it means they are not of the same species. Then prevention of fertilization. Sometimes, if you take a look at these diagrams here, the copulation, organs of copulation may not be the same size. So there should be something here that is separating these two from being able to do what? To fertilize. The structures may not be the same. So all of these are the mechanisms that are isolating our organisms, or that are making our organisms not to be able to reproduce once they formed new species. So please remember those mechanisms. And then the last part, okay, this is just an extract on reproductive isolating mechanisms. So name the 3 reproductive isolating mechanisms in the passage above. So you are going to read, you have this as your worksheet. You can work on it and look at all the reproductive isolating mechanisms that appear from this passage. So those will be prevention of fertilization, differences in behavior or different courtship behavior, non-biological factors or differences in the range, and then infertile offspring. So all of those, you're going to get them from that paragraph over there. So we want to move to the last part. Now, the last part of evolution by natural selection would be evolution in present time. Remember, the term evolution means, in general term, or in the simplest form, it means change. And it does not mean while we are still living here, evolution is not taking place. Evolution is still taking place. And we can see that more on organisms that are rapidly reproducing, or species that are rapidly producing. And those can be your bacteria and viruses. So remember, viruses and bacteria, they reproduce by binary fission. So when they reproduce by binary fission, their reproduction is very fast and it's rapid. They can reproduce in millions and millions. And then you can see how organisms evolve in that short space of time. So let us take a look at an example of how the bacteria species may evolve. You see here, there is a lot of yellow spots. These yellow spots, they represent bacteria. If you have a bacterial infection, or it is a pathogen or an illness that is caused by a pathogen of bacteria, you are going to take antibiotics. Antibiotics are the medicines that are going to kill this pathogen of bacteria. Then you will get better. That pathogen will die. However, if you take a look at these 2 red dots here, these 2 red dots amongst the yellows, they say these ones are resistant bacteria, meaning this bacteria will not be cured by the antibiotic that you have taken. It is going to remain in your system because it is not going to be killed by the antibiotic that you are taking, meaning it is resistant to antibiotic. Once it remains in your body, look at this triangle here. So the first 2, they were there. They remained. But where are the yellow? The yellow ones almost died. So there are only a few of the yellow ones that are left. When there are a few, what is happening? Look at what is happening with the red ones. The red ones are becoming more red and more. They are becoming more and more. Meaning, when they are becoming more and more, what are they doing? They are reproducing, and they are becoming even more resistant to the antibiotics. So meaning, as they are reproducing, they are changing. And with that change, we say evolution is taking place, because they started from being this, and now they are so many, and they are resistant to bacteria, meaning the scientists need to develop a new antibiotic that these organisms are going to be able to be killed by, because they have now become resistant to the previous antibiotic that was used. So this shows evolution in bacteria. You have heard in 2020, 2019, we started to have SARS-CoV-2 or the novel coronavirus. How many strains of coronavirus did you hear about? They even started naming them alpha, omega, and whatnot. Remember the ones that were coming from India? They would say this one is even stronger than the previous one. So what was happening with that coronavirus? It means it was evolving and evolving, kept on changing to becoming more stronger and more powerful. So resistant to whatever treatment that you may find. So it was changing. So that can also be an evidence of evolution in present time. So evolution is still happening even as we speak. And these organisms that are small or that are reproducing rapidly are the ones that are showing us that evolution is continuously taking place. Right. So, but before we start, we're going to start now with our next session of human evolution. I would like us to take just 1 minute break just to process everything about natural selection and therefore prepare yourself to start human evolution. Right. So we're going to start now with the next part of evolution, which is human evolution. But before you start with human evolution, you need to understand a phylogenetic tree. What is a phylogenetic tree? You have done a pedigree diagram. You have done a Punnett square. Please make sure that you know when to use or when are these diagrams used. For evolution, we talk about a pedigree or we talk about a phylogenetic tree. Phylogenetic tree. So what is a phylogenetic tree? It is a schematic form that shows the evolutionary relationships. Remember with a genetic, it was showing the inheritance of genetic disorders or genetic characteristics. But here we are looking with a phylogenetic tree, we are tracing the evolutionary relationships within a set of organisms or a group of organisms. Then we can break this word down into phylo means the organism's phylum group. Do you remember when you were doing classification in grade 10? You start with your kingdom, your family, your class, your order, your all of that, remember. And then there's where you do the phylum. Even when you were in grade 11, you spoke about the phylums a lot when you were doing plants. So the phylo in phylogenetic tree stands for that phylum. It tells you the phylum group of a particular organism. Then genetic, it is from the genes or the relationships between the genes. So the phylogenetic tree will tell you the evolutionary relationship between the phylums of different organisms. Then you should not confuse it with the pedigree diagram. Pedigree diagram, you remember, we use it when we do genetics. The one that you use in evolution is a phylogenetic tree. So what can you get or what information can you get from a phylogenetic tree? A phylogenetic tree can tell you who is the common ancestor, who is extinct, when did species on the diagram originate, or when did they start, and how long did they live for, and when did they become extinct. So all of this information in this bubble here, you can get that information from a phylogenetic tree or by studying a phylogenetic tree. So let us see, how does a phylogenetic tree look like? This is an example of a phylogenetic tree. And this one, it is showing us a simplified summary of the history of hominids. So you must be careful and check what is your phylogenetic tree telling you about. Sometimes it can be bigger than this. Sometimes it can be just a portion that is talking to what you want to study. So this one is an example that is showing us the history of hominids. The first thing that you need to identify on a phylogenetic tree is, where does it start, or where do you start? So you are going to check where the most oldest common ancestor is. Then once you establish that, you will see. So sometimes phylogenetic trees can face to the right, to the left, they can face up, or they can face down. You must be able to identify where to start. And then once you've identified that, you must also be able to identify your timeline, meaning from old to present. Present, remember, it must be here. And mostly the times are in million years. Million years. So when you are going back like this, you say 1 million years ago, 2 million years ago, 3 million years ago, 4 million years ago, 5 million years ago. So this goes back in time. So you will always start from present and read it backwards. And then from your backwards, you know you are getting your oldest common ancestor. That is where everything arose. And then from a common ancestor, when you get two lines branching, we call that to be descendants, meaning these are the descendants of a common ancestor. Any line that is going to come after the common ancestor is called a descendant of a common ancestor, meaning it came after. Yes, it is a descendant of that common ancestor. Right, so you've established that, and then you will further see it branching. Remember, where it starts to branch, where you see the line, that is where the common ancestor will be for the two descendants. They will always be. And then you get to a point where sometimes some of the lines, they just stop abruptly. Then you must know when it stops, where it has stopped. That shows that the organisms or the species have become extinct. That will tell you that this is extinction. And then when you see also the branching and organisms living at the same period, that will be speciation. So please make sure that you know how to read a phylogenetic tree, but we are going to use examples now to see how do you study or how do you apply this knowledge that you've learned about a phylogenetic tree. Right. So remember, one of the outcomes that we wanted to achieve was you must be able to place yourself in the family of the Hominidae. So you must be able to see where you are. Where is our place in the animal kingdom? Then here you see there's a superfamily which is called Hominidae, and it is divided into the families, different families of the Hylobatidae and the Hominidae. So our family is this one, is the family of Hominidae. But this family of Hominidae can further be divided into subfamilies of Hominidae and Ponginae. So you see, based on where you are coming, and then ours will be coming this side. Homininae. So you see, hominin, these are hominin. And then this hominin also can further be divided into tribes, the tribe of Hominini and Gorillini. And then we come to the genus. Our story, most of our story is here on the genus. This is what you must know. Homo, Pan, Gorilla, Pongo, and then these are the genus of others that are far from us. So the ones that you are going to focus on are the ones that are inside this purple oval or circle over here. So you must know the genuses and be able to tell where they come from. So when you see that you are here as a Homo, but you can know where your family comes from, your subfamily, and the superfamily. Right. And what is very important also, you need to remember from grade 10, how do you write a scientific name? A scientific name consists of a two-part, so which we call a binomial system. This binomial system, the first part of a scientific name of an organism is going to tell us about the genus of that species or the genera where the species come from. Here is the genus. So if you say Homo something, then you know that the Homo stands for the genus. And then the specific species name will come after. Let's say you are talking about sapiens. The Homo sapiens is a scientific name that we use for humans. But you will say the Homo will give us the genus, and then the species specific name will come after. So that is an example of Homo sapiens. Gorilla, gorilla. Remember, the first part of Homo you must also write, or the genus name, the first letter you must write it in capital letter, and then the specific species name you must write it in small letters. And all must be italics if you are using a computer, and then if you are writing in pen, you must just underline the scientific name. That is how you write a scientific name. And then the pen, troglodytes, pen will tell you the genus name, troglodytes will tell you the specific species name. So you can also shorten them as follows. You can write H. sapiens, but remember to underline or to italic. But with a pen you cannot show, or with a handwriting you can't show italic. So the best way if you are using your hand is to underline. And then another word, genera, the plural for genera will be genus. So what the first part that is telling us about the genus is actually the genera, right? So where are you in this phylogenetic tree made to look like a normal tree? So this is a phylogenetic tree that is showing you from your eldest common ancestor of the hominid species. So you are going to check which one is the eldest. Remember, I said some may start from the bottom up. So this one is facing this way. Because you see from the past to today. So these ones that we find at the bottom, the ones that appeared the earliest are the Adipithecus group, meaning Adipithecus is the oldest common ancestor of the hominids. And then the Adipithecus, you can see they appeared when 5 million years ago. They were there. 6 million years ago, they were already there. You see? And then you come to the next group that descended from the Adipithecus. That will be your Australopithecus group or your Australopithecines. So Australopithecus. Australopithecus. So your Australopithecus group will be the one that is coming after Adipithecus. So it will depend on when you asked, or whether you are asked for the earliest common ancestor of hominids or the most recent, or the question will always guide you on which one they want. And then from the Australopithecus groups, there are a lot of them you're going to study. I will tell you which ones you need to study. And then you have the Paranthropus group. The Paranthropus group You can check when it existed. And then you have the Homo group, which is the most recent. And in the Homo group, there are also a lot that appeared like 2 million years ago, 1 million years ago. And you are here, which is the Homo sapiens, and you've not been on this earth for quite a long time, because it's about only 200,000 years ago. So you will see all of this now when we unpack them. So this is just a diagram to show you how these groups came about, or how they descended from one another, or how are they related. Right. So to be able to master the skill, you must apply that knowledge with questions. So let us take a look at this question. We will look at it together to save time. Right. Question number 1. What is the type of diagram called, or what is this type of diagram called? So everyone must be able to get this one right. What is it called? It is called a phylogenetic tree. Remember, you must separate the words if it's too long. Phylogenetic tree. Don't write anything else. Check philo, it is with a PHY. And then, how many of each of the following are represented in the diagram? Genera. Remember, we said genera is the one that is the first part of the scientific name. So how many genera are represented here? I am going to give you just 1 second to count them. How many genera are represented here? So you can count with me. Let's start. You have the first genera being Ardipithecus, that will be 1. You have Australopithecus, that is 2. So Australopithecus, this one we cannot number it because it's the same as this one. Then you have Paranthropus, 3. Australopithecus, Paranthropus. You have Pen, 4. And then you have Homo. Then you have Homo, which is 5. Is there any other one? So you only counting what? The first part of these questions. So that will be your genera. So how many have you counted? You have the Ardipithecus, Australopithecus, Paranthropus, Pen, and Homo. So that gives us a total of 5. Then how many Homo species are there? Then you are going to count all the Homos. 1, we have Homo erectus, 1, Homo habilis, 2, Homo sapiens, 3, Homo neanderthalensis, 4, Homo neanderthalensis, 4. So I have counted 4 Homo species. I hope you have counted those with me. So we have 4. So it means now you are able to understand what is a genera and what is a specific species name. Now, name the species that have Paranthropus aethiopicus as a common ancestor. Now you're going to look for Paranthropus aethiopicus. So where is Paranthropus aethiopicus? There you go. So we found Paranthropus aethiopicus. Here it is. Now, what are the 2 species that have it as a common ancestor? So it is a common ancestor to which 2 species? To the Paranthropus robustus and Paranthropus bucei. You see, they became the descendants. Remember we said from a common ancestor you have descendants. So they have both descended from Paranthropus aethiopicus. So it means that the answer will be Paranthropus robustus and Paranthropus bucei. And you can see from the diagram also, we say they have descended from this. Name the hominid species that existed at the same time as Homo sapiens. Now, you're going to look at your diagram here to check this, the timeline. So the one that existed at the same time, which one is it? Homo neanderthalensis. Homo neanderthalensis. Because you can see here, they existed here. They arose from these Homo erectus, and then they They are the descendants of the Homo erectus, and then they existed at the same period there. First Homo species to appear. So which one is the eldest of the Homo species? You must check your time then. The first one to appear. Remember, we are going back in time. You don't go forward. So the first to appear will be the one that is further down, further downwards. So that will be your what? Your first Homo. Look here. Where did the first Homo start? This one. This is the first Homo. So that will be your Homo habilis. So that is how you interpret your phylogenetic tree. This is another question of a phylogenetic tree that you can tackle as homework. On your worksheet, you do have this. Right, those are the answers. But please, it's not about the answers. It's about how do you get to the answer. Right. The next step that you're going to get into is that objective on our list of objectives that says that you need to know the similarities between the Homo sapiens and other primates or the African apes. So this diagram is very important. The diagram, every time when you are asked about the similarities, remember this diagram, this popoki over here, because all your answers are there. If you don't remember this diagram, use your own body to start from the head to the toe. Just go and list all those in an exam room. Try to remember using your own body. So we're going to look at all the things starting from the head, going down. What are those similarities that humans share with other primates or with the African apes? So we're going to start with number one here. Number one, the humans with other primates, they share these characteristics of a large brain or a large skull compared to their body mass. So when you start, say large brain. Number one, the similarity is large brain. Number two, you come to the eyes. Here are the eyes, number two. So you've done number one. Number two, eyes are in front, or they have binocular vision or stereoscopic vision. This was one of the questions that was asked in last year's paper, so you must know. Eyes are in front, so you start from the head. Large brain, eyes are in front. You get a mark for saying that. Or they have binocular vision or stereoscopic vision. All humans and other primates have that. Number three, freely rotating arms. Rotate your arm from here, from the shoulder. Rotate your arm. Then your whole arm, not just this part. Your whole arm, it can rotate. So all primates are able to rotate their arms like that. So freely rotating arms, that is number three. And then what is happening here? Longer upper arm. This upper arm is longer. So longer upper arm, number four. Now you are going down with your hand. You see? You started here. You said freely rotating arm, longer upper arm. Then you have elbow joint allowing rotation of forearm. Remember, the forearm is this one. This is the FA. I will write FA. Forearm. So FA. The forearm is allowed to rotate by what? By the elbow joint. The elbow joint allows all of them to have a freely rotating forearm. And then you come to number six. They have 5 fingers. All primates, all humans, 5 fingers. 5 fingers. So that is your number 6. So you see, you can use your own body. So you started from the head. You came to the eyes. Then you came with the free rotating arm, longer upper arm, elbow joint allowing the rotation of the forearm, and then 5 fingers. Right. Then opposable thumb. Those 5 fingers have an opposable thumb. What do we mean by an opposable thumb? All Homo sapiens and African apes, they have a thumb that is working in an opposite direction to the rest of the fingers. So all 4 fingers are going down, but the thumb is going up. So you see, it is working in an opposite direction. And this opposable thumb is going to allow us to have that precision grip, the ability for you to hold a pen in this way, or also for you to put that thread in a needle. So that is also the opposable thumb allowing you to do that, and also to grip. And then flat nails instead of claws. Homo sapiens, primates, we have flat nails, no claws. We don't have claws like the dinosaurs or like all those, but think of all those West claws. We don't have that. We have flat nails. So you come to check, they are flat nails, or you can say they are bare fingertips with fingerprints. Then all of them, that was number 8. Number 9, 2 mammary glands, whether they are male or female. In front of them, there are 2 mammary glands. And then you come to number 10. 10, you can go back to the eyes again and say, you said the eyes have a stereoscopic vision or binocular vision. Eyes are in front. Number 10 here, you can also say the eyes have cones, or they can see color. We can all see color vision with other primates. So, and then also this one, the one that is showing you the differences of the genders. So you can see there is sexual dimorphism. Sexual dimorphism means there is a distinct characteristics for the male or the female. So you can distinguish between a male and a female on these organisms. So with the humans, you know, the males will look this way, the females will look that way. Also with other primates, there is that distinct characteristic that you can tell. So all of these are the characteristics that you need to know off by heart. Use your body to study these characteristics. They are very quite fun to learn. Then, what is it that makes us now different, or the humans to be different from the African apes? Think of an ape. I want you in your mind to put an ape here and put a human here, and just imagine how they look. Then you will look at the differences to say, okay, yes, we do share all those other similarities. However, here we are different. So let us start with the first main one. So the first one would be bipedalism. Humans are bipedal. African apes are quadrupedal, or they have quadrupedalism, meaning they can walk on all 4 limbs, or they walk on all 4 limbs. And then humans, they walk upright using the hind limbs, meaning the legs. So what makes the humans to be able to have this bipedalism? It is because of the position of the foramen magnum. So you're going to say the difference is that in humans, the foramen magnum is in a forward position. But in apes, the foramen magnum is towards the back of the skull. And this is what makes them to be quadrupedal. And with the humans, what makes them to be bipedal is that the foramen magnum is in a more forward position. Remember, you don't say below the skull. That is going to be wrong, because we want to see now where below, towards the front, in a more forward position that is going to allow the vertebral column to enter vertically, then allowing us to have what? That upright posture. Then, how is the shape of the spine? It has an S-shaped spine. However, with the African apes, they have a C-shaped spine. So once you see something that is C-shaped, you know that cannot be one of the humans. The humans one must be an S-shape. And then they have a shorter pelvis, or humans have a shorter and a wider pelvic girdle, whereas the African apes have a longer and narrow pelvic girdle. Here, please use these words, longer and narrow, shorter and wider, because when you start using terms such as tall and thick and what, they mean something that is different. So please make sure that you check this terminology. Shorter and wider pelvic girdle in the humans and longer and narrow pelvic girdle in the African apes. Then you come to the head, the cranium size, the part of the brain, the cranium. The cranium size of the humans is larger. Then the cranium size of the African apes is smaller. So if you are given two skulls, and then you want to check which one is of the human, which one is of the African apes, the one which has a large cranium is the one that is of the human. And then the one that has a small cranium is the one of the African apes. And then the palate shape, it has a round jaws. The one that has more rounded jaws is the one of the humans. And the one that has a rectangular jaw, you see it is very sharp, like a U shape or rectangular shape. That one will be of the African apes. And then how are the teeth? The dentition. The teeth of the human beings, they have no gaps in between the teeth. And then the teeth of these African apes, they have gaps in between, which we call them a diastema. So if you are given just the teeth, you must look. The ones that have smooth teeth without gaps will be the one of the humans. The one that has gaps or the diastema will be the one of the African apes. And then the canines. The canines are those pointed teeth. For the humans, they are small. But for the African apes, they have large canines. And there's a reason for that, because they have to tear raw meat and whatnot. But with us as humans, we've evolved to eat softer foods. So we don't need large canines for any of that, because we won't be tearing any hard meat or raw meat, because we cook our meat as evolution happened, you will see. Then prognathous. Humans have a flat face. African apes have a slopey face. You can just take your ruler. If your ruler is able to draw a straight line from the forehead to the chin, you know that is one of the human. But if you draw a straight line from the forehead to the chin and then there's a gap, then you see that there is actually a slopey face. Then you know that is one of the African apes. And then the cranial and the brow ridge here on top of the eyes, there is no space for human beings. It's just flat. It is absent. And then the cranial and the brow ridge in the African apes, it is present. There is that hollow space on top of the eye sockets there. So those are the differences that you need to mention. So when you are given diagrams, you must be able to mention these differences. So you need to study the diagram of the skull, of the pelvis girdle, and of the teeth. So whichever one they give you, you must be able to tell which one is of the humans, which one is of the African apes, using this diagram. So this is just a picture that is showing you. You can take a look at the skull, the cranium size. The cranium is large, the cranium is small here. You can check the foramen magnum will be there. The foramen magnum will be in a more forward position in the humans. Foramen magnum will be towards the back of the skull, and then the C-shaped vertebral column, and then you see there is an S-shaped vertebral column there. The pelvis of the human is short and broad, and then here is long and narrow. You see, so all of these you must be able to identify when you are just giving diagrams. Then with the teeth also, you must be able to tell that the one that is more rounded is the human. The one that has large, sharp canines, these are the canines, the ones of the African apes. So you must be able to tell those differences. Then you will get questions such as this one. It will say to you, provide label for X. Then you must say, what is X? Remember, we said it is the foramen magnum there. And then tabulate two anatomical differences between the jaws in diagram C and D, which represents the trends in the human evolution. So once you see that it says tabulate, then there's 5 marks, and then you are asked to tabulate 2 things. Then you know that another mark will be for the table itself, for drawing a table with columns and rows. So not just a table without the columns and the rows, and the headings, the subheadings in the table. So what are the differences between those jaws? Diagram C, it has large canines. So you see, large canine. Diagram D, small canines. The diastema or the space is present. You see, there's a space here. Here, there is no space present. The jaw is U-shaped in diagram C. The jaw is C-shaped, or you can say more rounded, and this one is sharp. So those are the differences that you can mention. Then give the letters only of the diagram that represents the skull with a larger brain capacity. So which one shows a larger brain capacity? That will be skull B, because you can already tell that this skull is the skull of the Homo sapiens, of the humans. Then the one that is more prognathous, that will be skull A, because it has a slopy face. Then account for the position of X in the skull in diagram B. So X, what is the meaning of this, of the position of the foramen magnum here? The foramen magnum, or X in the human, is located in a more forward position in the skull. Then it means this organism is bipedal, since the spinal cord enters vertically. So this means it provides for bipedalism. Explain the significance of the shape of the spine that is associated with skull in diagram B. So the skull in diagram B, what is the significance of the shape of the spine? Remember, the shape of the spine there will be S-shaped. Now, in diagram B, yes, the shape of the spine is S-shaped to balance the weight above the hips, also to support the weight of bipedal organisms. So in order for you to walk upright, the shape of the spine must be able to carry what? The weight that is on top of the pelvic girdle. So that is why humans have an S-shaped spine. And then these are just some other questions that you can get on the differences and the similarities between the humans and the African apes. You can go through those. You have the worksheet. Then you need to be able to know what is a transitional species, because sometimes when you are studying evolutionary trends between organisms, you may find that there is an organism that shares or that shows the intermediate characteristics between the two genera or between the two species. You may find it has the characteristics of an ancestor species, and it has the characteristics of the descendant or of the present species. So that one that is in the middle, we call it a transitional species, because it has both characteristics of the old and of the new. Then this information, you are going to use it now when you are applying your knowledge when answering the questions on human evolution or the relationships thereof. Then you need to tell us about the fossils that were found in South Africa. You must know the fossil evidence, remember, to support human evolution. Now we are talking specifically about the human evolution, to say humans have evolved in this way or they are related in this way. You must give us some supporting documents, or you must give us some supporting evidence. So the supporting evidence in this case for the fossils are the fossils that were found. So let us check the ones that were found in Africa. So the oldest fossils that were found are those ones of the Australopithecus africanus. So Australopithecus africanus was found where? In South Africa. Take a look at the pictures. Which ones were actually found, or what did they name them? There was one that was found that is falling under Australopithecus africanus, that is called the Taung child. It existed at about 2.3 million years ago. It doesn't mean it was found here. It existed 2.3 million years ago. That is the Taung child. It was found where? In the village of Taung in the northwest in South Africa. Who found it, or who is the scientist that found it? It was Raymond Dart in 1924. So these dates are very important, because this might appear in the multiple choice questions or just in any other question. Then you must know your fossils that support human evolution in South Africa. So the Taung child is an example of the Australopithecus africanus, and it existed about 2.3 million years ago, and it was found in the village of Taung in South Africa by Raymond Dart in 1924. Then Mrs. Pless There's also a huge debate whether it is a Mrs. or Mr., but we still refer to it as Mrs. Ples. Mrs. Ples existed at about 2.5 million years ago, and he was found where? In the Sterfontein caves in South Africa. Most of you maybe have been privileged enough to go and visit the Sterfontein caves. This is where Mrs. Ples was found by Robert Broom in 1947. Then Littlefoot is another one of the Australopithecus. There was a question that was asking, name the 3 fossils of the Australopithecus africanus that were found in South Africa. You will say your Daunchild, Mrs. Ples, and Littlefoot. Littlefoot existed at about 3.9 to 4.2 million years ago, was found in the Sterfontein caves also in South Africa by Ron Clark in 1994. So very important. And then Australopithecus CD bar. Now these are the ones that were found also where in the Malapa caves in South Africa. The example that was found, that was named there, nicknamed, was Karabo. Karabo, remember, is an example, Australopithecus CD bar. And it lived at about 1.95 million years ago. It was found by Brett Iloff and Lee Berger, Professor Lee Berger, in 2008. And then our most recent child would be Homo naledi. Naledi meaning star. It lived at around 335,000 years to 236, not million. So you see, it is just years ago. So this one is recent. It was found where? At the cradle of humankind in South Africa, in the Dinaledi chamber, to be exact, by Professor Lee Berger. Professor Lee Berger is still here. He works at WITS and he works for the National Geographic. So this was found in 2015. I remember it was a big television news. We watched Ramaphosa going there when they were going to reveal Homo naledi and Neo there. I also went there to also witness this historic moment. And then the Homo sapiens, the Floris Batman, existed at from around 200 years ago. That is us. We're still existing even today. Then some of the sites or some of the fossils that were found in the Free State, in the Makapansgat in Limpopo, the Border Cave in KwaZulu-Natal, and the Blombos Cave in the Western Cape by Professor T.F. Dreyer in 1932. So you must know the years, you must know where the sites where they were found and what fossils were found, because all of these fossils are used as evidence to support the human evolution. Then another evidence that is used to support the human evolution is that one of mitochondrial DNA. Remember, the mitochondrial DNA can be used to trace the female ancestry. Why do we say that? During fertilization, we know that the sperm cell, only the nucleus of the sperm cell enters the ovum and fertilizes the ovum, whereas the rest of the sperm cell, together with the tail, the mitochondria and everything, it disintegrates or it is discarded. Then the mitochondria that is going to be left in the ovum is that one of the female. So this one can be used to trace female ancestry and provide us with genetic evidence to say this is, remember, mitochondria, you can find DNA also in there. So that DNA can tell us how organisms are related. And then cultural evidence. When you go to Marupeng, you will also see there are stones, there are tools that we are told that they were used by organisms that lived, or primates that lived before us. So you can see that there are stone tools that can be found. Now, using stones with cutting and sewing improved human nutrition. So some of these organisms, we are told that they started using tools to chop their food, to cut their food instead of their teeth, and then that also improved human nutrition, or it evolved to improve the human nutrition as to the type of food that we eat today and how our teeth are. And then the development of stone tools became more sophisticated as hominins evolved. So as hominins started evolving, the one that descended from the other, also improved because remember the brain capacity and the intelligence was also building. So the more complex they became, even their tools started to show that now they are becoming even more sophisticated. If they were only using a rock to grind or to chop, now that rock is going to be even cut further into a shape that is going to perform other different purposes for making life easier for this hominid species. And then the tools requires planning and thought. So that also shows the evolution of the hominids. And then here you can see this is a diagram that is starting to show us the increasing brain size and the tools becoming more sophisticated. So if you check the Homo habilis are the first to use tools. That is why they are called the handy men. Homo habilis, handymen, that is the ones that started using tools. So you can see their tools, mostly they were just round rocks and blah, blah, blah. But with the Homo erectus, with the descendant after the Homo habilis, the tools started to get more sophisticated and sharp. But with the Homo sapiens, look at the tools. The tools are even now, they look like knives. Some look like saws. They look like, they are even more and more sophisticated. So as our brain size increased, we also started seeing the development of the sophisticated tools that we use today. And these tools also did what? They were found as evidence. And then they also provide that evidence for evolution to say this is how humans have evolved. They can be used as that. And then the out of Africa hypothesis. What does it say? Remember, it says that organisms or hominid species originated from Africa. So you must be able to see that. What evidence did they use to support this out of Africa hypothesis? This one you must be able to state it as it is, because the evidence speaks for itself. Fossil evidence information on each of the following fossils that serve as evidence for the out of Africa hypothesis is that Ardipithecus fossils are found in Africa only. So Ardipithecus is the oldest ancestor of the Homo hominins. And they say here, their fossils are only found in Africa and nowhere else in the world. So that must tell you what? They've originated from Africa. So this also provides that evidence. Australopithecus fossils are found in Africa only. These onlys are very important. Only. So if you find something somewhere only in one place, then it means that is the original place. Then you can't find it somewhere else. Then it means everything that came after that originated from that place. So you must know all those two. Ardipithecus fossils are found in Africa, and these are the oldest common ancestor of the hominids. And then the Australopithecus also, it came after Ardipithecus, are found in Africa only also. So that is reason number 2 to say that is why we support the out of Africa hypothesis. And then number 3, Homo habilis are found in Africa only. And then the oldest fossil of Homo erectus are found in Africa. So Homo habilis, remember Homo habilis were the first Homo now species, the ones that fall under the genera Homo. So the Homo habilis are the first ones. And then they say the fossils of Homo habilis are found in Africa only. So this must support that, okay, it means if Homo habilis is found in Africa only, it means the hominid species originated where? In Africa. So it is supporting that they all originated from Africa and therefore migrated to other parts of the world. And then the last reason is that the oldest fossil of Homo erectus, which is Homo erectus comes after Homo habilis, but the oldest of Homo erectus was found where? In Africa. So whilst the younger fossils were found in any other parts of the world. So because this is the oldest, it also provides a reason to say the hominid species, or yes, not the hominid species, the primates, they have evolved from Africa, or they came from Africa and therefore migrated to all other parts of the world. These are the reasons. And then some of the evidence also that was used was genetic evidence for mitochondrial DNA. Then the analysis of those mitochondrial DNAs, it traces that the oldest female of the ancestor was found today to be on the East Africa. So this also plays a very important role to give us that mitochondrial DNA, to say the oldest female ancestor was found where? In the East Africa. That was through the analysis of mitochondrial DNA. So that is the out of Africa hypothesis, and we have come now to the end of our topic. Remember, this is a very big topic, but you can get good marks on this topic because it is fairly easy. If you can just go back and look at the pointers that we've discussed, you will do very well on this topic. And then there are questions. You have these questions on your worksheet. Please just try to answer these questions on your own as homework and try to check where you are as a Homo sapien, and also know those characteristics or those reasons that support the evidence of out of Africa hypothesis. So we have come to the end of our topic, and I would like to thank you so much for watching this lesson, and I will see you again next time when we do the revisions for your prelim papers. And good luck and happy